Could be.
Okay, so rough timeline. We're looking at in September, we provided the draft guidelines, allocations, required output measure, delegation agreement. We circulated those for public review. That public review period closed in October, but in the meantime, we had an advisory work group and a technical assistance work group that we set up to go over those documents, go over questions and answers, and really start to work out some details of how the program's going to function, how we're going to get it moving. We finalized those in November. We developed a question and answer document, which I think I'm pretty sure we sent out the draft to everyone. So you should have a draft of that document at this point. And we started discussions to formulate a technical assistance center similar to the Dirt and Gravel Road Center at Penn State. We're in talks right now to kind of formulate that and get that moving. So we'll dive into the documents now. So at the commission meeting last week, we provided them these documents for their consideration. They did approve all three of these. They are pending legal review, but really, what are they? What's the delegation agreement? What's in the required output measures? It's basically an agreement that allows us to transfer funds to you at the district to implement and administer the program. It goes over the roles of the district and describes the role of the commission, talks about funding sources. We describe required output measures of the district. That's obviously the ROMs or required output measures. And we talk about program outreach, implementation, and technical assistance. So the changes to those documents that we took that were in them when we went to the commission, we updated the accounting of funds in the delegation agreement. We wanted it to show clearly that interest from any interest earned by those funds has to go to ACAP projects. That was just a clear thing that we wanted to make sure. We want to put as much of this money into projects as we can, and that was one way of helping to do that. We also updated the required output measures. We added just a simple or more frequently for replenishments. We want the districts to be able to request quarterly replenishments, but also if you're spending the money more rapidly than that, we want you to be able to do it more frequently. We don't want to limit you to just quarterly, and this is due to the timeline and the overall nature of the program, the way it's set right now with the deadlines. So we added that simple adjustment into the delegation agreement. And that was it. Those are the major changes for those two documents. We did update the guidelines. What are guidelines? They established a criteria for administering the program, right? It's kind of similar to an admin manual, if you will, but not really in that detail. Describes the eligibility, what you can fund, how to prioritize what you fund, application process, any funding limitations, obviously in the role of the districts in implementing it. Some changes to that in the application review. We added some language that the districts have to review complete applications based on a certain criteria, which is established in the law. And we want those to be reviewed at least quarterly, unless otherwise approved by the commission. But really, we don't want you to hold on to applications for a year. That would really slow down the time frame of this. So we want you to be getting applications and funding them in a timely manner. So that was a addition to the guidelines. One of the biggest questions that came up in the work groups and in the question and answers was, is there a cap on ACAP funding? We didn't feel that we needed a cap per se, but we wanted to limit it in a certain way. We didn't want, a district to spend their entire allocation on one if you're getting several $1 million. So we thought the best way to do that was to say, if an applicant is going to receive in excess of $500,000 in any given year, you need to get permission from the commission to give them more than that. So it's kind of a cap, but it's not really a cap, right? So If you're looking at funding a $750,000 project and you want to use all ACAP funding, by all means, reach out to us, tell us what's going on, give us an update of the project, what the funding is going to be used for, how it's going to go, and we'll discuss it with you. So that was a big question. The other thing we added to guidelines was that we wanted to make it clear that incentive payments can be used for certain BMPs as approved by the commission. So the way we envision incentive payments working is something like cover crops, right? Where there's not really a great way to document that and it'd be really difficult to get invoices and check costs. So we thought that would work for incentive payments, but we didn't want to let it go for everything, right? So that's why we added that line in there, just to cover those.
Jessica Buck has her hand up.
Oh, yeah, Jess, go ahead.
Hi, Justin. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. A question about the ranking. Are districts required to create their own ranking to rank projects if our intention is to choose projects that have been already submitted and ranked through NRCS?
That's a great question, Eric. Do you know the answer to that?
I can let you know. CEG does have a ranking system. CEG is a little bit of a precursor to ACAP. What we did with CEG is the state had their own ranking criteria, and then we allowed the districts to come up with their own ranking criteria. So it was like a two-part ranking system. I expect that will be the same thing as ACAP, and once we get our ranking criteria done at the state, we'll probably send that out to all districts.
Eric, this is Carl. EQIP projects certainly have gone through our ranking criteria, and that's no secret formula. That's something NRCS shares freely what that ranking criteria is. So there should be a way to make the ACAP ranking and the EQIP ranking, compatible and or similar. So there should be a way to make those two work together. Obviously, you have to meet the requirements of the ACAP law, but I don't think that the EQIP ranking will be incompatible with that. So we'll have to figure that one out and let you know.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Eric Naguski has his hand up. What can I do for you, Eric?
Just a quick question on that $500,000 cap, or more specifically, the request to exceed that 500,000. Would that request have to go to a commission meeting for approval, or is SEC staff going to make that decision?
Eric, I'll take that one. I would say that we're envisioning that would be a decision of the staff, but we'll have to make sure we go through and have that delegated down to the commission staff with the districts. Depending on how many of those there are, that could become a timing issue. So
right.
At this point in time, I would envision asking the commission to allow us to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Is there any more? I think that's it. Okay. The commission also approved the apportionments and the allocations. What are apportionments and allocations, right? The SEC was given a one-time payment of $154 million in the new Clean Streams Fund. We must have that committed by December of 24, and it has to be spent by December of 26. The legislation obviously sets certain parameters for us. There's a 4% cap for the commission for admin expenses and also contractual services. We have a requirement that funds apportioned to the districts must be spent within 2 years. That's a pretty standard requirement there. And there's obviously a requirement to reapportion any unspent district funds to other districts with the criteria in the act. So the ACAP apportionment, obviously, if you take out the 4% for commission administration and the 4% for construction services, that leaves 141.68 million that were split up according to the 4 apportion criteria that are in the legislation. The only thing we added to those criteria was a minimum. set the minimum at 300,000, but all the other 4 criteria were weighted equally to come up with apportionments. So how are we going to allocate that then? So say your apportionment is $300,000. That's over the course, we're going to give you over the course of 3 years, we're going to split that up into 3 $100,000 allocations. You do have 2 years from the date of receipt to commit and spend those funds. So please keep that in mind. The commission, obviously, we will consider a more frequent allocation if you can demonstrate the ability to spend it timely. We don't want money to keep you from getting this out the door, right? We don't want timeframes to, if you're spending that quickly, you can show us you're working through that money in a timely fashion. We'll consider replenishing it faster. So there's a little incentive there to keep the money flowing. This chart just kind of overviews how we foresee a typical allocation working. Allocation 1 is looking like early 23. And then allocation number 2 will come hopefully around July of 23. And then the third one in July of 24. So that'll then give you 2 years to really wrap up the program. Hopefully by then we'll have an ongoing fund, but this slide just generally shows you the breakdown of the apportionment and the allocations, how it's going to be split up. But really, if you take your total apportionment, you split it by 3, that's what you're looking like your allocation is going to be. Okay, and then you can take half of that, that'll be your advance. So moving forward, we have provided all these documents to legal counsel. Once legal counsel is complete, if there's any changes, obviously an update of those changes will be sent out to all the districts. I'll give you a clear document that highlights anything that was changed. If anything changes, we're going to take it back to the commission for their December conference call. Hopefully run it through them. Again, that's if there's any changes from legal. Our plan is to have this delegation agreement to you as soon as we possibly can. Timely action on these is very important, right? We're really getting this started, and we'd like to get the funds out to you as soon as we can to get you the ability to keep running this program and get it up and running quickly. So we're really looking to move this forward as fast as we can. We don't have a set date yet, obviously, on when the delegation agreement will be complete. We're still waiting legal review, and obviously if any changes come up, we'll have to run it through the commission. So stay tuned. Just a highlight of what we have under development right now. This is a laundry list of forms that we came up with that we think we need to really get the program going and help wrap up the projects. But if you guys can all read this list. If there's any forms that you think we need, feel free to, send me an email or tell me, and Eric and I will make sure to get on those. But this is a list of what we think we really need to get things going. So the question and answer document, we took a draft version of this to the commission to show them. Obviously, you all have a draft copy of it now. We're going to use this in lieu of a full administrative manual. We don't have time, and we don't want to put the resources in right now to draft an admin manual, right? So we're going to address specific questions using a question and answer document. We developed the draft using all the questions and the comments we received in the open comment period. And as we go, we can add questions and answers to this document as the program progresses, and we can use that to really guide different policies and answer specific questions, right? Eventually we'll get an administrative manual, but I see that down the road quite a bit. So we want to leave things as loose as we can, right? It's starting up. There's some deadlines we got to meet. We really want to make things easy as we can for you guys to get this money going and get the projects on the ground. So we thought this was the best way to handle that. We do have a list of, I don't know, maybe 5 or 7 frequently asked questions. I can go through those, but really as I go through these, feel free to ask questions anytime. Raise your hand, we'll get you on there. But at the end of this end of this little section, I do have open time for any questions. So if you have something that we don't address during these frequently asked questions section, feel free to ask it at the end. So the biggest question, how's prevailing wage going to work? Do we have to do prevailing wage? How's it going to work? We've been meeting with Department of Labor and Department of Labor and Industry, met with them a couple times to discuss it. We're still discussing individual specific topics of how it's going to work, but it's likely prevailing wage will apply to most ACAP funded projects. We do have Labor and Industry said they'll offer to help present in the near future. We're planning on doing a full webinar, go over all the specifics we can, answer all your questions. Hope to have some examples from some CEG counties that have dealt with this and done it. Maybe we can get some of them on board to help talk about how it worked in their county. But just know that it's highly likely it's going to apply to most things we do with ACAP funds. Can we pair ACAP with other grant sources? Absolutely. I'm pretty sure we can. We should be able to. In most cases, we foresee EQIP and ACAP being combined and as a good way to utilize funds and help cover kind of the gap that EQIP doesn't cover. Just keep in mind, right, if you're using two different sources, you have to follow both of those programs' rules and policies, right? That's pretty standard for most programs, right? You can't go against one like ACAP guidelines, or you can't go against NRCS guidelines if you're using their funds. Can we use ACAP funding to pay for planning requirements? Yes. However, again, with timelines and such, we recommend that you start looking at things that are already in the pipeline. Things that already have the planning complete and have BMPs ready to go. But if you need to, yes, ACAP can be used for that, but we really want the primary intention of it is to fund BMPs. So we're hoping maybe other grant funding sources could be used for the planning, and then we could tack on with the BMPs. But yes, you can do that. We covered this earlier. Is there a maximum set? There is no maximum, but if you go over that $500,000, again, you need commission approval to do that. Can districts pay contractors directly instead of landowners? Really, the enabling legislation requires that we pay an eligible applicant who is a ag operation, right? So really, just straight paying a contractor, the answer is no. We're still looking through assignment agreements, whether they can do that or not. I have heard an example that seemed to work well and we thought was a good idea, which was when the district writes the check to the landowner, they put the landowner and the contractor's name on the check. So basically the landowner is signing it and turning it over to the contractor. That may be one way to, if you're really worried about the landowner not paying the contractor, that may be one way to cover it. And again, we are investigating assignment agreements that may be possible. Big question is engineering. We're really flexible with engineering. There's several things built into the program that could help. The district may choose to employ their own engineer. You could contract with a private sector engineer. Technical service providers could be hired by the applicant and reimbursed with the construction money. There is a cap in there of 10% of the construction cost. NRCS could provide some engineering service. And then again, a combination of anything up above is more than could be useful. So we are also in discussions right now. We're trying to create, like I said earlier, create a center similar to the Center for Dirt and Gravel Roads. There may be some engineering assistance there, but hopefully that will be another avenue. can districts pair with each other to administer the program? Or if one district doesn't want to administer it, can another one do it for them? The answer is yes. And we've met with a couple districts to talk about this already. The way we see it working is one county kind of takes the lead, hires the staff, covers the work in the other counties, but we sign a delegation with each county. That way each county would get a certain allocation. And we have a delegation agreement we could have with each one for a certain amount of money. And then they have a letter of understanding or an MOU between all the counties to say, okay, here's what we're going to provide. This county A is going to provide funding. County B is going to provide the staff and the administration of the program. We've seen this work in one area with dirt and gravel roads. Actually worked very well. One district staff covered a lot of the workload for another county, and it worked out very well. So if you guys are interested in doing this, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll help however we can to get that moving, help facilitate it. That may be one avenue to cover a county that doesn't feel they can do it. The other part of this question is, will the commission have to contract with a third-party agency if the district doesn't do it and there's nobody nearby that wants to handle it? But yes, the commission does have duty in the legislation. We have the requirement to implement the program. We are going to have regional field staff. We're not really sure how it's going to work out yet. We may contract with a third party. We may use regional field staff to do it. Again, it all depends on workload and funding and how that's really going to work out specifically if you choose not to take it in your county. Is there cost share rates in ACAP? There's nothing in the legislation that requires cost share. At this point, we are not requiring from the commission, we're not requiring cost share rates. That's something we'll leave up to each individual district to determine. I think Eric said in CEG, they started roughly around 75%, and a lot of those have changed to 90. Is that right, Eric?
That is correct.
Yeah, so it seemed like as CEG developed, they really went away from the 75% cost share rates and really wanted to up it to help pay for more of the project. So we decided not to set a rate, but if the districts want to set one, you're welcome to do that with your local policy. That is the end of my list of frequently asked questions. We have plenty of time, so open it up to you for questions.
Justin, there's a couple questions in the chat.
Okay. Let's see. Go up the chat here. Did you say that a ranking form is being developed by the SEC? Yes, we are going to develop a draft ranking sheet, kind of similar. You know, the Dirt and Gravel Roads has one that they put out. It's a draft ranking form. So, yep. Can that form be changed or additional criteria added? Yes, again, Eric answered that in the chat. Yep, it's intention to let each district have their own. Will there be a limit on the amount of a contract amendment? It's a good question. I don't think we covered amendments. Carl or Eric, did we cover that at all?
Eric, doesn't the agreement and or the guidelines put a 10% cap on contract amendments?
I believe it's 20%.
Justin, I'm pretty sure there's an allowance in there. We'll have to go back and check what that allowance is.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
Yeah, I think Eric's right. At 20% sounds familiar. It might be my dirt and gravel mind speaking, but at 20% seems to ring a bell.
Yeah, in the CEG program, we took that from the dirt and gravel road at 20%, up to 20%.
I'll find out where that is, Ian, and we'll get you some more information on that. Thanks. That's a good question. Can the Q&A doc be updated on a schedule? If questions are randomly entered, it could cause confusion. Yeah, obviously we can update it, I don't know, monthly or something, post it to our website. Yeah, we can or maybe I can send it out monthly. How you tell me how you'd like to see that updated. You are right. If we just randomly do it every so often, it may confuse everyone. But that's a great question, and we'll talk about that. Prevailing wage will kill a lot of participation. Ag contractors will not want to deal with that. This will make things, thanks, Dean. Unfortunately, I can't really change the law. That's not in my purview, unfortunately. I really wish it was. We are talking with them and we're doing our best we can, but you know, we have to follow the law as well as everybody else does. Is a sample county policy one of the documents being developed? Eric, do we have a sample policy?
A policy for what kind of policy are you looking for, Donna? If you want to unmute and sort of-
Sure. Like Dirt and Gravel Road, I thought that you folks had like a sample 2 or 3 page policy. You know, it doesn't have to be, it can be, if you have certain specifics in there that you're going to require every county to do, you know, that would be nice if it was just standardized. But if we're just going to be able to totally do our own policy, I guess there would be no sample, but it could just have sections like, you know, cost share rates, we could fill in the blanks, things like that. But
Justin
maybe,
and Eric, I think we should be working on some type of a sample template, at least the things that we believe they need to have a policy on. And that's not inconsistent with dirt and gravel roads where there's a set of policies that they need to have in place in order to be able to carry out that program.
Yeah, there's like set required policies, like conflict of interest, that kind of stuff. That, I mean, we can put together a pretty easy sample. We can get that out to you, Donna. We'll add that to our list.
that would be great. Thanks.
Yep. Right. Sally, would the SEC consider handling the finances of ACAP with the district handling project management? Whoa, Carl, this would be a question for you.
That's not something that we had considered. It's, you know, it would not necessarily be something that would be consistent with the delegation as currently drafted. We'd have to sit down with you and try to figure out what it is that you're truly looking at here to better understand it. But I think this is a delegation. You accept the entire delegation. You just don't accept pieces of it. So I would say unless we can sit down and figure out what it is exactly that you're looking at this point in time, I would say that the delegation is written so that you handle both the administration, the finance, and the technical assistance. So certainly Sally would be glad to have a conversation with you, but I don't think the program's currently set up to do what you're saying here, if I understand it correctly.
We were just trying to figure out how we would deliver the program given the resources that we have. We don't have a full-time admin person, so handling the financial portion of it would be a challenge. So I was just trying to figure out what our options are. So thank you.
Okay, if you want to have a conversation, we'd be open to having a conversation, but I think this is something outside the scope of what we envisioned when we wrote the delegation.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, is there a list of approved conservation practices that ACAP can fund? Yes, we're working on that. I think that's one of our documents, a specific BMP list. We're in develop. We have a draft now, but we really want to take a look at that and finish it up. So yes, we are working on that. Can the templated dirt and gravel road program policy statement be sent out for districts to review? And yes, we can do that. We can send you some templates. And actually, every district's dirt and gravel road policy is on the dirt and gravel road website. If you log in under county conservation districts, there's a tab on the right that lets you pick every district, and you can read their specific policies. And you can utilize one of those, or check those out and see if you want to use one of them. But yeah, we can do that. All right. Ryan, for the contract amendment, is that referring to if actual costs are higher than budgeted costs? Yes, Ryan, that's an amendment is like if you anticipate the contract's going to be $100,000, actual costs come in at $120,000, you can amend that original agreement for up to 20% to cover those actual costs. Good question. Jeff, who can certify practices? It's a great question. Eric or Carl, any help here?
I'll jump in and take a shot at that. Eric can correct me then. Depends on the practice that you're talking about. If you're talking about something like a cover crop, anyone that has, training and knowledge of what a cover crop is and what it looks like and, can distinguish a single species from a multi-species cover crop, individuals can be pretty readily certified to do that. As you progress up through more complex projects and practices, it will depend. Certainly, if you're doing an ag waste storage that's liquid or semi-liquid, that requires a PE by DEP rules and regs to be able to do that. So on the other end of the spectrum, we're looking at people who are certified or professional engineers to be able to sign off on things like liquid storages and probably roof structures. But in between those two extremes, there's a host of practices. There's the NRCS job approval rating system that certainly could be used. So if you have NRCS job approvals for certain practices, you could certify. The commission is looking with the technical work group right now of trying to establish a system that would parallel the NRCS system and provide job approvals for technicians. But it would be someone who has training and experience to be able to design and oversee the implementation of that practice. So again, it'll depend on what practice you're looking at, and it'll depend on the skills of the individual that will be able to do that. And again, I'll just say that the technical work group that's high on the list of their issues and challenges, and we're working through what that could look like.
So Carl, is there an actual list for the BMPs that we can use?
At this point in time, is there a commission list? We do not
Yes.
have a commission list at this time, but you could certainly use the NRCS list for job approval. If you have someone who has NRCS job approval for a waterway, watershed with less than 5 acres of drainage or whatever it might be, those individuals can certify those practices. Eric, any other perspective on that?
So Carl, just to clarify, what I'm asking for is, part of that question is, what BMPs are covered by ACAP? I mean, we mentioned cover crops. Is it everything on the REAP list? Is it everything on the NRCS EQIP list? Is it a combination of the two?
Okay, well, that's a different question than what we started with. We will have a list for ACAP. Hopefully we'll have it as soon as possible. It will look very similar to the REAP list, except obviously we can't pay for equipment and a couple other things that REAP pays for. But we will use that REAP list and go from there. So if you're looking for eligible practices, I would start, if you want something soon, I would start with that REAP list, and we will be putting out something consistent with that REAP list that will be eligible practices for ACAP. So there will be a list. We don't have it to hand to you currently, but we should have that hopefully, within the next month.
And if it's not something that's on that list when we put it out, is something we'll be able to discuss with you if that BMP is not on that list. So it's just because it's not on the list doesn't mean it might not be funded. We would have to talk to you and see what that BMP is before going forward.
But I go back and I'll reemphasize something that Justin said earlier. We have the enabling legislation. The enabling legislation talks about this going to eligible applicants, and eligible applicants are ag operations. So it'll have to be one of those BMPs. it will have to be someone who's an eligible applicant, and it will have to be on an ag operation. So, you know, there may be practices that you might have someone apply for where there's no affiliation to an ag operation. It could be a rural landowner that, you know, maybe has a cabin somewhere. If you can't tie it back to an ag operation and an eligible applicant, it's not ACAP eligible. So we've had a number of folks saying, can we do stream restorations on non-ag operations? I'm pretty certain the answer to that question under ACAP is no. Can we do a stream restoration on an ag operation? The answer to that would be yes, as long as that practice is a part of their conservation, ag ENS, nutrient management, or manure management plan. So again, look at those definitions of eligible applicant and the definition of ag operation. That's the two key definitions to being able to determine whether an individual or an individual practice is eligible for that particular operation.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Thanks, Jeff. What design standards will be required for implementing BMPs? Again, I think Carl just went over this in some details, but yeah, NRCS has design standards for those. We don't have standards at this point, but NRCS is a good place to point. I'm sure we're going to mimic a lot of those for our standards when they become a thing. So if you have specific questions on specific BMPs, feel free to reach out to us. I'm sure Ed can help with that, or we can get you an answer.
Justin, we look to the NRCS standards. We don't look to reinvent the wheel. And in REAP, we have on occasion deviated from an NRCS standard where it was necessary and appropriate. But you know, we will look to the NRCS standards as the primary standard unless there's a reason to deviate from that. So.
Okay, thanks, Carl. Jess asked, can you remind us where we can find these materials as they are developed? That's a good question. We have a website, I think right now, Eric, that we could use, but I think primarily as we develop them, we'll email them out to all the district managers until we can get like a central source location to house documents and get a website up and running really that we can utilize. So thanks. Good question. Holly, is staff able to charge time to the program now for outreach and planning? If we incur costs now, are those reimbursable under ACAP? Yes, the agreement is going to be backdated to, I think, what was it, Carl? July?
I think it's 8th? July 8th. This is as far back as we can go.
Yeah, so we can go back to reimburse as far as for expenses as far as July 8th. So, yes, is the answer to that. Sean, 10% of project costs for engineering may not cover costs. Yes, that's correct. There is a lot of money other than that 10% that you could use for engineering. But you're right, 10% may not cover the cost of engineering.
I just want to clarify, Justin, that 10% of project cost of engineering, that is if a landowner hires a third party itself. So if you have a project that landowner's wanting to get engineering done quicker than he can get it elsewhere, he can hire that engineer or whatever, and then he can recover the cost of up to 10% of the construction cost. So if the landowner had a $100,000 project, he could submit $10,000 for engineering, so he could submit an application for $110,000 to the district.
Yep, thanks, Eric. Will there be sample landowner district agreements, landowner contractor agreements? Yes, we are working on those. That's part of our draft documents right now. Yep, Jennifer, I put the slide back up. Thanks, Abby, for putting that in the chat. Thank you. Kate, if we don't have anyone certified with job authority, who would sign off on these practices, assuming it would be something more elevated than a cover crop? Oh, that's a great question. Carl?
read that one again, Justin.
If the district doesn't have someone certified with NRCS job approval authority, who would sign off on the practices? Assuming it was something more complicated than a cover crop.
Could potentially be a PE who has the ability to do that, or we would have to work specifically with the districts to get them up and get them trained. The technical work group is looking at prioritizing some training. Tim Peters, who's the NRCS state engineer, has given us, I think, 6 or 7 different priority areas for training on systems that are commonly found, put in together, such as waterways and surface drainage and heavy use protection and those types of things. So one of the things that we're looking at is hopefully within the next 6 months is to begin offering some training that's very specific to these. So that would be the first thing that you would want to make sure you had a technician that if you have practices that are in your scope of your applications and your program, that if the training comes up, you get them to that. 2, if you don't have someone, we'll have to work with you to try to figure out who we can get to sign off and certify those. But those are things that you need to be working on, where you need to know the skills of your current employees, and you need to be looking to fill the gaps, whether that's with private engineering or someone else that can help you step in and do that. So Kate, that's something we'd have to work with you on to try to find the specific solution to the problem that you have in your county.
Yeah, a lot of times if there's a BMP that needs to be designed, a lot of times that whoever designed it will come in and do the project certifications and make sure it is installed correctly.
So especially if you're using an outside entity to do that, make sure your agreement contract covers all the activities that you would want that individual to be covering.
Okay, next question. Will quarterly reports on project spending updates be required along with reimbursement requests? Yes. You're gonna have to, highlight how that funding was spent, what you utilized it for. We're hoping to have a quarterly report system similar to Dirt and Gravel Roads up and running, but again, that's something that's gonna take time. So for in the meantime, yes, we're gonna be looking for, how you spent those funds. We can't just reimburse the money with no idea of how those funds were utilized. So, yep, we will be looking for some kind of quarterly report. We will outline specifics for that for you. I'll make a note of it now. But great question. Thank you. What will the outreach requirements entail? Will those be outlined in the delegation agreement? Eric, Carl, do you remember, do the ROMs have specific outreach stuff in it? I don't remember there being anything specific about
I think
outreach.
they're pretty general that they do outreach. I don't think there's
Yeah.
any specific items currently in the ROMs, but we'd have to go back and check that.
Yep, I can double check, but I agree. I don't think there's anything specific. Heather, what is the definition of an ag operation? That's in the legislation. I can find that for you. Eric, do you know it off of memory or have it handy?
I don't. I'll have to pull it up here.
That's okay. We can get Heather. We'll get that to you.
Can you send that to everyone?
Yep. If a landowner completes the work themselves, do they need to pay themselves prevailing wage? We are working with labor and industry on specifics at the moment. That's a great question. What we've been told up to this point, and this is not a firm determination. I don't work for labor and industry. I can't give prevailing wage determinations. However, what they told us, the answer to that would be no. The landowner does not get prevailing wage. The way they were explaining it in our last call, it kind of sounded very similar to dirt and gravel and municipalities, right? The farmer or the ag operation is kind of similar to a municipality in this case, right? So they wouldn't get prevailing wage, but if they contract anything out, then anything they contract out would have to have prevailing wage. So that's an answer without being an official answer. Hope that we're still working with them for specifics. We will put together a prevailing wage question and answer document, kind of like Dirt and Gravel has, that'll hopefully help outline all these things. Okay, Kate, if training opportunities will be available, getting someone to those trainings won't be a big deal. It's good to hear working. Thanks, Kate. Appreciate it. All right, can you define an untreated ACA? Manure management requirements may not be as complex as NRCS. To address an ACA, for example, NRCS may require a concrete surface with a roof, whereas basic manure management plan guidelines may not require that. Eric, do we have that? Do we define untreated ACAs at all? I don't know that we've done that.
It's not defined, but it could be a vegetative buffer below it. It depends on the situation. It's going to be a case by case whether it's going to be treated or not, but there's no requirements.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ryan. We'll have to work on that and we'll add that to the document.
So Justin, that's a good example where, you know, an NRCS, I want to say standard. I'm not sure that's a standard if that's just one of their administrative requirements, but if nutrient management and NRCS treat ACAs differently, it's the state law that says you have to treat the ACA. So we'll have to look at what's appropriate there. And if the nutrient management standard is the most appropriate standard, then we can recognize that. But that said, going back to what Eric said earlier, if you commingle dollars with NRCS, you'll have to meet both the state standards and the NRCS standards, or whichever is most stringent. So if it were a straight ACAP project, you may have some flexibility there based on ACAs and how we treat them under nutrient management. But if you're going to commingle funds with EQIP, you're certainly going to have to meet the requirements of NRCS. So I hate answers that say maybe, but that's a maybe answer, and it might depend on the specifics.
Yep. Thanks, Carl. Kate, do you anticipate quarterly report system being online similar to Dirt and Gravel? Yes. I would love if we had a GIS system right now that was exactly like Dirt and Gravel that just said ACAP and we could run with it. But believe it or not, it's a lot more complicated than just saying, yep, we would like that. So we're in talks with them right now. We got a meeting coming up, I think next week, to try to formulate that system. But yes, I envision it being online. I would assume it's going to take a few quarters to get that up and running. We don't know specifics yet. So I'm thinking in the meantime, it's going to have to be paper quarterly reports. We may have to come up with a form or something for you. But that's on our topic to discuss. So thanks, Kate. We will get you more detail in the meantime. Gretchen, Justin, can you repeat the location of the Dirt and Gravel website where the policies can be found? This is, I brought it up on my screen. There's a link there to it. If you go to the center's website, go to the program resources, conservation district tab, come down here, you can choose a district like, I don't know, Bucks County, for instance, and it'll take you to their page. And then right here is a link to their policy. Okay. Then every district's on there. You can take a look at all those, give you an idea what they look like. That's the last one from the chat. I'm sure there's more. Anybody else have questions they didn't enter into the chat or anything you'd like to talk about?
Justin, this is Jessica. I had to switch to my phone. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
A question I have. I am bringing ACAP to our board for discussion and hopefully action at our meeting in December. What is the next steps on our end that you need in terms of delegation agreement, and what is the timeline for that?
So I think your board has to approve entering into the delegation. And then Carl, you would know more specific. I think you have to sign, once we have it finalized, you sign and get it back to us, and then we have to run it through legal counsel, through the whole cycle on our end. And then once that's approved, we can start making allocations. But really, if you're planning to enter into the delegation, you can start incurring costs. You can start getting the program running. You can start looking for projects to fund. All that stuff can be ready to go if you know your board is going to enter the delegation. Carl, do you have anything else?
What I would say is Jessica, sooner the better as far as getting your board to make a decision. You have the documents as approved by the commission. I think final legal review will probably result in few, if any, minor changes, we're hoping. So, you know, you have the documents that they can look at. I would say that if you can get your boards to act on these either in December or January, that's good timing. But we will need to know fairly quickly in the beginning of the new year whether you're in or out, or at least still considering, because where you don't do this program, the commission has to figure out how to do it. And with the timelines running, we're going to have to get into those counties that decide they may not want to do this and figure out how to do it. So, you know, December is a good time to have this discussion if you haven't had it with your board already. January is certainly a good time, but would encourage you to do that as soon in the new year as possible if you're considering getting into the program. If you know you're absolutely not going to do it, let us know as soon as you can. If you know you're absolutely going to do it, let us know as soon as you can. And if you need some time to work with your board or need someone to talk with them, we'd be glad to help you with that. If you want to know what this thing practically looks like, I'd encourage you to talk to the counties that have done CEG for the last 3 years. Lancaster, York, Cumberland, Bedford, Center, and Lebanon have been in CEG. A lot of what you're seeing here, the reason we were able to stand this up so quickly is because we had existing CEG forms and policies and experience. So if you have questions, any one of those CEG counties would be a good county to talk to about, you know, how has this worked in your county? If you know, one of the things that we'll repeat over and over is, you know, flexibility. We need flexibility at the local level, or you need flexibility at the local level to do this. And we'll look for the opportunity to give that flexibility as long as consistent with enabling legislation and as long as it's consistent with commission policy. But there are certain things that we just can't change. We can't wave a magic wand and remove prevailing wage requirements from state law. You know, it's something that exists. We can help you manage through it. We can help you explain it. But at this point in time, it's an indication from labor and industry that will apply. And the question isn't if it will apply. The question is, how will we manage through it? So CEG counties have had experience with that. We've had a couple of them come back and say, I think the word Lancaster used was trepidation. We started prevailing wage in CEG with some concerns, but they found a way to make it work in Lancaster County. I think York has said something similar, and I think Cumberland County has found ways to manage through the prevailing wage requirements. So CEG counties are a group that you can really look to. If you're looking at this and saying, I'm not sure we have the resources to do this well independently, I would strongly encourage you to talk to neighboring districts that may be able to partner with you to help you do this. We had a great conversation with 2 districts from the Northeast who were looking at potentially a 4-county arrangement in the Northeast to be able to work on this and to do this. They thought individually they would be very challenged individually to do this well, but if they put 4 counties together, they thought they had enough resources to hire basically a full-time staff for this and to do it in that multi-county arrangement and do it well. In that particular case, I think that was also an NRCS field delivery unit or whatever they call their service delivery areas. So things seem to match up pretty well in that discussion for a potential multi-county arrangement. So those are some things to think about. If you know, again, you're going to do this program, please let us know. If you know you're not going to do it, please let us know that too. And if you have questions, by all means, talk to our staff, talk to CEG counties. They can help you understand how this really works on the ground. And just encouraged by all the excitement and all the interest and all the discussion that's going on. So we've worked really hard. Eric's busted his butt over the last 4 to 5 months to get this up and running. Justin's come in running and hit the ground running. So we're excited about potentially bringing on some additional staff. We have been given specifically for ACAP additional 9 positions that we're looking at. So we will have some staff to help you work through this, similar to the nutrient management field areas that we have, and some additional staff here in central office to help make this work.
Thanks, Carl. There's 2 more questions came in the chat. Lisette, when will the first quarterly report be due? Was there a report due in the 3rd quarter of 22? That's a great question. No, there was no report due in the 3rd quarter of 22. We're going to have to really talk about quarterly reports here on our end and figure out how we're going to do it going back, and when we really want to start requiring those. I would assume once we get the money out and we're starting to get replenishment requests, then we'll start talking about how to report that, and we'll get some requirements to you. But you didn't miss anything, Lisette. You're on pace, so thank you, and stay tuned for more quarterly reporting info. Ryan, is there a public bid requirement? This is something we've been discussing in depth here. We didn't see any at the time, or there's nothing in the legislation that requires public bid, but there may be some other requirements out there. That's something we are discussing with legal as well to find out exactly if there is a public bid requirement. Obviously, we highly recommend it. I think bidding is a great way to help control costs. But as of right now, we don't have one. We don't know if there is for sure a requirement or not, but we will let you know.
Justin, the standard answer for districts and bidding is that the conservation district law does not require you to bid per se. Unlike townships and boroughs and others whose enabling legislation specifically require bids. But in other programs, such as the Old Bay program, I believe there was a bidding requirement established by the commission. We're still looking at what those requirements could or might be. Until we get to the point of giving you a specific decision, we strongly encourage bidding on projects of any significance or substance. It can help you control your cost. It can help you manage your costs. And it just is a good public policy. But we will be working on that specific answer for ACAP in particular as to what the bid requirements may be.
Okay. Well, any other questions not in the chat? I think we got a little bit of time left. If anybody has questions, feel free. All right. Well, I appreciate everyone's time. We got a lot of great questions. We got a lot of things we need to follow up on. And stay tuned. We will be in touch and hope to do some more of these in the future. Hopefully the near future we'll get together again and keep these going. So thank you. Appreciate everybody and appreciate your patience with us and getting this program running. Adam, yes, we do plan we'll get it out somehow. Again, we'll get it out to everyone. We'll get the presentation out. So thank you. And again, if anybody has questions, feel free to contact me anytime. Appreciate it.